Hi, Judy. Hi, everybody else. We'll get started here in just a few minutes. I know we said the start time was noon, so I just want to honor that. All right, so it's noon and we want to be respectful of everybody's time. So today is the public information meeting about our housing choices for complete community land use management ordinance text amendments, or LUMOTA. I'm going to kick this off by giving us a very quick presentation, and then we can discuss and we'll go from there. So give me 1 second, please. Hey, does everybody see this in full screen?
Yep, you're good, Anya.
I'm good. Okay, thank you, Taz. I'm Anya Gran-Fettermack. I'm here with other members of the planning department, and we set up this public information meeting and the one tomorrow night at 5 p.m. to give folks a chance to weigh in on the proposed text amendments that are going to expand housing choices in the community. So tomorrow's meeting is a hybrid. Today's is virtual, and no new information will be presented tomorrow night. It's just a second opportunity for us to hear from the community. Additional information about the project is available on the project webpage, the public input page, as well as the handouts that I added to the chat before we started. And so our goal today is really for this to be a listening session, but before we do that, we just wanted to make sure we gave you an overview of the project. So generally the text amendments that we're proposing fall into two buckets. The first one is a set of proposed text amendments that are needed now. So we noticed that we need to do some cleanup in our setback and height exceptions. And we also wanted to relocate some of the information about duplexes and accessory apartments. Some of you may already know this, but we've been struggling with how to define townhouses. Because of the way our definitions are currently written, they don't fit cleanly into the definition of single family, but they also don't fit in well with the definition of multifamily. And so that was something that we needed to do anyway. As part of this, we also wanted to focus on increasing opportunities to create missing middle housing. And this is where we're adding additional housing types like triplexes, fourplexes, and cottage courts. We're proposing to allow these in most zoning districts, and we'll get to which ones they will be allowed in under our proposal in a minute. We're proposing to remove density limitations, and then we also want to create an administrative approval process for triplexes and fourplexes. Currently, these are treated like multifamily, and so it requires a very extensive process that's also often very discouraging for folks that are trying to build these. As we talk about this proposal, these are the definitions and what we mean when we use these terms. So when it comes to missing middle housing, we're really talking about the type of housing that it is, the scale of it, and the use. I know we've had a lot of discussions in the community about how missing middle housing relates to missing or middle income residents. However, because we're focused on zoning, we really want to focus on the form of the building and the use, not the property values and who can afford to live in it. And then gentle densification is really thinking about increasing density in a very incremental way within the existing single family neighborhoods that we have. So through the council's complete community strategy and housing studies, we found that our current housing supply just isn't meeting our current needs. We're seeing a lot of new single family or apartment housing, but we're seeing some owner occupied condos and townhouses, but we're still missing a huge piece in the middle. The other challenge that we have is that much of Chapel Hill is zoned for single family only. And you'll see in this map, that's all those areas that are colored in cream or yellow. And so a lot of the households in our community are cost burden. Others choose not to live here at all. And so that creates longer commutes, more traffic and parking demands, and some environmental concerns. So from these studies and the recommendations of these reports, we've heard that we need to remediate a very difficult urban form. We need to revise the planning process to help incentivize missing middle housing. They found that about 500 new housing units are needed annually. And of these, about 440 are for individual households and about 45 are for student housing. We also need a diversity of housing products at different price points to increase affordability. And this isn't just about property ownership, it also includes rentals. So where did all this information come from and why are we doing it? All of this has been supported by our council adopted long range plans that set goals for housing development. So we have the Chapel Hill 2020 plan, charting our future, the mobility plan, the town's climate and action plan. And then finally, the council did submit a petition calling for an expedited and incentivized production of affordable and missing middle housing. And so links to all of these documents are available on the public input page if you need them. So when we talk about increasing density or actually eliminating density, what we're talking about is really trying to keep the mass and bulk of the buildings the same as what would be allowed today. It would just be that you could fit more units within that same mass. And you can see in this image how that can be accomplished. This chart, which was also in one of the PDF handouts that I attached, summarizes where we believe that these uses can fit in. And so where there is a P, that means that it's a permitted use. If the P is underlined, that means that we're proposing to permit it in that zoning district. And you'll see the zones up here at the top of the chart. And then those housing types that have been underlined are the types of housing that we are proposing to introduce into the land use management ordinance or LUMO. And so I've highlighted a couple here that I think would be helpful for us to walk through today, since these are sort of new terms for us. The first one is a cottage on a compact lot. And so we have talked to the planners in Durham who went through a similar process of expanding their housing choices. And they found that there was still a lot of demand for single family detached residences. And their solution to aid in the affordability was to allow smaller houses on smaller lots. So we've come up with a similar solution of allowing cottages on compact lots. The minimum lot size would be 2,700 square feet, and only one compact lot could be created per parent parcel. So you couldn't take an existing lot and make 4 compact lots, you could create 1 compact lot. The building dimensions are intentionally smaller and would allow up to 1,600 square feet with an overall building footprint of only 1,000 square feet. And each of these little cottages could include up to 2 units. Triplexes are an existing use in the LUMO, but fourplexes are a proposed use. When this building type is proposed to be constructed in an existing residential neighborhood, we want to make sure that it fits in and that it takes on the appearance of a single family house as much as it can. And so for this reason, if you dig into our proposal, you'll notice how we came up with some neighborhood context regulations that will help control the bulk of the building, the massing, the fenestration pattern, and even building heights, so that it fits in better with the neighborhood and with its neighbors. We will require that, for the most part, that this new housing type follows the underlying zoning in terms of like the setback and the building height. We reduced the impervious surface to 0.5, which is consistent with single family. And then we've also limited the unit sizes to 500 square feet to 1,600 square feet. We also asked that the tree canopy be 20% because we understand that, tree canopy and open spaces are very important to the community. Cottage courts are another proposed use. And so these would be collections of 3 to 12 cottages that are built around an open landscape space, kind of like you see in the image here. The cottages are smaller in size with no more than 1,600 square feet of floor area. They could contain up to 2 units, but they could also be just single family detached houses or cottages. And generally these should be no more than 1 to 2 stories in height. Again, we've introduced an impervious surface ratio of just 0.5 to emphasize the open space, and we'd require a tree canopy of 30%, which matches that of the multifamily use currently. And then finally, townhouses were a use that is already in existence in the community, but we needed a better definition. And so we have provided some design standards in our text amendment that'll help address concerns we've heard at the council and the Community Design Commission about townhouse communities being too vehicle oriented, and we want to see them be more pedestrian friendly. And again, we've required about 30% tree canopy coverage, which is matching that of multifamily development, but it does help keep a lot of the trees. So we recognize that with these text amendments, we're opening the door to new development. However, staff believes that developers will still have to navigate some obstacles. And so one of the issues that we've continued to come across is that we're not proposing any changes to the town's 13 neighborhood conservation districts or NCDs. Northside and Pine Knolls currently allow duplexes and triplexes, but only as affordable housing, and many of the NCDs already prohibit duplexes. The other piece on this is that many neighborhoods have HOAs, restrictive covenants, entitlements, and even plat notes that might limit development to just single family or single family and accessory apartment. And so those lots would not be able to be developed into a duplex or triplex. We also are not proposing to change any of the stormwater requirements for multifamily. And so currently, if you're building 3 or more units, our stormwater department requires that you provide some kind of stormwater control measure. So that has not changed. And then finally, the fire code may be more restrictive than the LUMO. And a lot of times this is related to our access requirements. So here's how we're proposing to move forward. Next Tuesday, January 17th, this would be before the Planning Commission for a recommendation. Then on January 25th, we'll go to the Town Council for a public hearing. And then finally on February 22nd, the Town Council is scheduled to hear this again, possibly for action. So these are additional opportunities for the public to provide comment, but you can also provide written comments on our public input page. And so with that, let me stop sharing and Sorry, it's here we go. And then we can, if you want to use the raise your hand tool, we can bring you into the meeting and we can hear your comments. And I'm just going to bring you in the order that you're raising your hands.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I wanted to thank you for sharing this information with us. I'm really excited about it. I did have one quick question. I wanted to ask if there's any opportunities. I live in the NCD, and I understand that you just said there's no opportunities to change those in my NCD. I'm in Elkin Hills. We're right on all the bus lines, so great opportunities to increase to some of these other building types. So I wonder if there's any opportunities, will be any opportunities for that here in this neighborhood.
I think Elkin Hills currently does not allow any duplexes or multifamily. I'd have to check because there's 2 Elkin Hills, so it depends on which one you're in. So at this time, we're not proposing to amend that, but that's not to say in the future that we couldn't re-review the NCD requirements. That's a good point.
Yeah, I know we already have some. We have some duplexes. We have a fairly new one, so I guess that didn't seem like it went in before the NCD, but I guess maybe it did. We're along Barclay, Justice, Weiner, in here in this area. So great location for that. Very dismayed that we're not allowed to do those right now. But definitely on board with this. Thank you for making these suggestions and excited to see it move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. You're gonna have to forgive me. I don't remember what order I sent you in, so I'll call on you and I'll ask you to unmute. Melvin, would you like to go next?
I think you're muted.
Yep.
Can you
you're
hear
good
me?
now.
You can hear me now?
We can.
Okay, sorry about that. Here's the question that I had 2 or 3 questions, if I might could. I'm curious to know who initiated this in the beginning, which it looks like it's been going on for a couple of years. And I believe that I read there was a study that maybe a California company did for y'all. And I was wondering as to who agreed to that and how much that might have cost to do. But really more to the point here, those are just a couple of ancillary questions. What concerns me about this is you were showing, for example, that you could take a property and you could potentially knock a house down and you could make it as much as a 4-plex. If it's a 4-plex, then you got 4 different families living in there, which means you got 4 times the garbage you would have with 1 family living in there. You've got 4 times the number of cars, 4 times the number of traffic, 4 pulls on your water supply, 4 pulls on your utilities. How is all that going to be taken care of to make sure Chapel Hill could even accommodate all that? And who is going to pay for that? Is that going to be in addition to your tax bills, your property tax bills?
Nope, those are good questions. Given the number of people I want to discuss this, I'm gonna try to take questions and maybe we can come up with a question and answer sheet that we can publish after this meeting, just so that we make sure everybody gets heard. But I know you said you had several questions. Do you have some others you wanted to add?
Do I have some others? No, that was kind of the main crux of it, because I was very concerned how Chapel Hill is going to accommodate all this and who's going to be paying for all that. And one last question. It seems to me, based on that you were talking about, I think, a meeting on the 17th and various things, what exactly, since this is just, at least from my viewpoint, has just recently been put out to the public, what is the rush about this? Why are we not giving time to really cover all the bases and what this might do to everything down the road. Why are we in such a rush?
I think the planning department is just moving ahead based on council direction that we've received and the interest in having this completed. But thank you for your other questions, and we'll make sure we get those into a question and answer sheet for you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Richard Mitchell, I think you were next.
Oh, thank you. So I live in R2 zoning in Colony Woods without an HOA. Would I be able to vacate my house and rent out the rooms to students because it would no longer fall under the single family dwelling?
Well, I think you'd still be a single family dwelling. I mean, you could do that now. You don't have to live. You can rent out a single family dwelling. You can be an owner occupied single family dwelling.
But could I rent it out to multiple, could I turn it into a group house where, you know, each room is individually broken up and I could, you know, just charge per room?
That's a good question. I don't think you'd be able to, because our definition of a rooming house would still apply. And so if there's more than 4 unrelated people in a house, it becomes a rooming house.
Got it.
Um,
And also, I guess my final question is there also a map that has the current zoning for Chapel Hill overlaid with areas that have HOA? Because it sounds as though this will impact groups differently, because if you're in an HOA, most likely you won't be able to do any, you know, there won't be any development that you can do outside of the covenant of the HOA. But, you know, this will really only impact people that are outside of an HOA, which are traditionally the more historic, lower income areas of Chapel Hill.
So the town doesn't enforce HOAs, but we do have a map, the GIS map. I included a link to it in our chat, and you can see the different zones that an address might be in, as well as the neighborhood conservation district, or if like the historic district applies.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep. I'm not sure who's next. So Kim Stahl.
Sure. I have several questions, but I'll just do Q&A. I had a quick one though. In the housing types, several of the lines said follows underlying zoning. And at the beginning, it looked as if there were going to be changes to things like setback. Can you talk about how those underlying zoning changes will interact with these changes? And I guess I'm thinking mostly of, you know, well, can you just speak to that?
Sure, very quickly, because I know a lot of you might have this question. We are not proposing to change the required setbacks, lot sizes of the underlying zoning. The only time that there would be an exception to those requirements would be if you were doing the compact lot with the cottage. But otherwise, the only change to your zoning is going to be what housing types are allowed in that zone.
Thank you.
Yep. Kim, did you have other questions, or was that the big one?
I can just put them in the text Q&A.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Susan Lyons.
Anya, thank you for doing the review that you did. I have 2 kinds of questions. The first one was the one I did put in the Q&A, and that is, how will this impact the local historic districts?
And I think that is a good question. And it's going to allow different uses to be allowed within them. The design standards, all of that will still apply.
But the design standards will apply,
Absolutely.
but it will allow different uses.
Yep, depending on what the underlying zoning is.
Okay. I'm just gathering information now. So the second question is, could you again go over what's going to happen differently with impervious surface and tree coverage?
So we didn't change that. Generally, if it's multifamily, well, currently, if it's multifamily of 3 or more units, the impervious surface is 0.75 or 0.7. And the only amendment that we made to that was that we said if you were a triplex or duplex or cottage court, that you were gonna have to have a lesser impervious surface of 0.5. So for the large apartment complexes that we see, that impervious stays the same. And then we also introduced tree canopy coverage requirements for the triplexes, fourplexes, cottage courts. I think those were the main ones where there was a new use.
And going back to the historic district, what types of residences can be in the historic district?
Let me add that to our queue. I mean, I'll add all these to a
Okay.
question sheet, but let me add that one because it's going to depend on what the zoning district or the underlying zoning in the historic district is.
Okay, thank you.
Let's keep going in order here. Julie McClintock.
Unmute.
Julie, oh, there you go.
All
Julie.
right, I think I'm here, am I?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right. So I like all the questions that have been asked, and I'm wondering if that there would be a really great interest from all the people attending the call to really have more background that, you know, not wait for questions to be answered. Like Judy could provide something like, you know, how did the Rod Stevens report generate the Jennifer Keesmaat effort, and what is, you know, just to give us a little more over an overall view, because I think a lot of folks have not been following this complete communities effort, which has been going on for months. And then my second question is, I really think when you engage in public policy and a major change such as this, more time is needed, as one person pointed out, but we also need a little more specificity about who actually it affects. And so if the town wants to do this, and there are aspects of it that are good, but there are other aspects that might really do harm, you really need to let those parties that are affected know that who they are. And so what that means is what neighborhoods have covenants in effect or not, for example. What neighborhoods are the ones that are most apt to accommodate the kind of changes that are being proposed? Thank you.
Thank you. Fred Lamb, you are next.
Were you
Yes.
not going to give Judy a
Oh,
chance?
sorry, Judy, would you like to? Sorry, Fred.
So I'm not prepared to go into depth on that, Julie. If you have,
Just an overview of, you know, what was the objective here? What was the council trying to do? here?
so Anya kind of alluded to this in the very beginning, that we had a Rod Stevens report was done roughly 2+ years ago now, that showed that there is a need for about 400 to 500 additional housing units per year. Trying to address that. And one of the things, I mean, we all know the cost of housing and all of those issues, but trying to create a more diverse housing stock. I mean, we know, I mean, everybody sees the apartment buildings being built, and we all know there has not been a swell of single family homes being built. And we have identified that there's the missing middle, that we are not seeing smaller homes being built. We're not seeing the duplexes and townhomes, cottage courts, all of those mixed middle housing there. So trying to create opportunities for that is the quest of this, trying to help meet the need of the 500 dwelling units that is shown to be needed each year. So that is the quest, and to provide diverse opportunities for folks.
Right. And then if you could say a word about Keesmaat, just Jennifer, about what she's been doing with the council.
So there is a complete communities process. Jennifer Keesmaat is a consultant that's been hired by the town. Back, I think it was December 7th, that council did adopt the complete communities framework. This process is trying to bring policy to the town that would create a complete community. I mean, in the term, using that very loosely, it's hitting all of those things that we want in a community where you can live, work, and play. You have people are able to afford to live here, that there's diverse housing, so you can attract different types of people. So this process is in support of the complete community process. And we are looking at this as one of the implementation spokes of that complete community process. And we can talk, happy to talk more about that, but I do want to make sure we hit all the questions that are
That's
asked
helpful.
about
Thank
this.
you.
Fred?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, since you stated, I believe, that those neighborhoods which have NCDs and those neighborhoods which have HOAs and associated covenants are not going to be impacted by this proposed zoning change, I'd really like to know, and I think a lot of people would like to know, specifically which neighborhoods are being impacted. Is this in fact 10% of the neighborhoods in the town, or is it 90% of the neighborhoods in the town? Now, how much of the population are you going to update?
That's a good question and something that we've been looking into. Thank you for asking that. Did you have any other questions?
No, that's it.
Okay, sounds good.
Just like to know who it's going to be.
We'll add you to our question list. Jeff Green,
Hi, do you hear me?
we can.
Great. Thanks for holding this. Just a couple comments. First, I'm glad to see that the revised version of the proposal includes the standards for cottage homes. I think that's a really great change. Secondly, I just want to follow up on what Ms. DeMarco mentioned earlier. There are NCDs where it may be appropriate, to allow the sort of missing middle housing, some gentle density. So after this project, hopefully it gets adopted next month, I would suggest sort of revisiting those NCDs and looking at NCDs where it might make sense. Thanks very much.
Sounds good. Thank you. Jill Blackburn.
Yes, thank you for having this meeting. I echo what some people have already said, is that there's very little information or knowledge about this proposal in the community. And I think it's very important before you continue and get further along on this, that there's a pause, and that all neighborhoods and citizens in our community are involved in an informational discussion beyond what's happening today and the next evening meeting. I think this proposal has significant implications for citizens, property owners, neighborhoods, and it would be very good to get them engaged in this, to understand the background, to understand the implications, to understand what neighborhoods will be affected by this. So I encourage you to do that before any more work is done on this. In my neighborhood, we have tried just in the last day or so to try to get information out, but very few people know about this, especially coming out of the holidays. We want to keep community engagement as robust as possible. And the town has made some errors in that regard as of late. So let's really try to improve that for this.
Thank you.
Jill, can I ask you a question? So what are your thoughts on how we can reach more? I mean,
Well, it's a great question, Judy. And, back in the day, the town would have a representative from the town that would be the representative to a neighborhood. Like way back when, Lauren Clark was the representative in our neighborhood. She would come to our neighborhood meetings, share what is going on. And from town level, we would share concerns or things that were going on in our neighborhood. And we had a really good connect. Over the years, that has changed. And I think the disconnect between homeowners, property owners, and the town has just continued to get wider and wider. And I'm sure all of you and the town council feel fully engaged in this process and fully informed. But I would say from a citizen perspective, I think there's a huge gap of information that's missing. And especially for a proposal like this that has such significant changes and impact for our town, you're beholden to get in to connect to those people, either by smaller group meetings, sending out. I mean, there's been nothing sent out in the mail. I'll tell you, not every neighbor is plugged into social media, so you can't always capture everyone that way. But I think, today, I think you need to use different types of platforms to reach out to people. But thank you for this meeting today. This is a good start.
No, thank you for your feedback. We really appreciate it and for giving us some ideas. Christine Burnt.
Hi, this is Christine. Hang on a minute. There I am. Welcome. I had a couple questions related to the environmental impacts of this proposal. Chapel Hill is built on a hill, and eventually you come down the hill to outlying neighborhoods. But for those people,
I think I did that. I moved the wrong person. Sorry.
That's okay. We'll give her a second to come back.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chris.
Sorry, Chris. That was me. It wasn't intentional. It was a mistake. Sorry.
Here I am. So I wanted to say, I was saying that Chapel Hill is built on a hill, and you eventually come down off the hill to flatter areas. And to me, it feels like the proposal is going to have a huge impact on neighborhoods with steep slopes and with a lot of resource conservation district in them. So I wanted to know if you could study or look at the effects of this proposal on the RCDs in town and areas of steep slopes. And I did see you have tree cover, but how much tree cover is going to be lost in these neighborhoods, which tend to have a lot of tree cover right now. So that's a concern I have, is the environmental impacts. And you do have the impervious surface limits, which are good. Maybe they need to be stronger. Maybe the tree coverage needs to be greater. I don't know, but I would like you to look at the impacts on the environmental considerations. My second question has to do with the Blue Hill District, which has always seemed to me to be a good place for this kind of development. And instead, and I think council originally looked at, how can we get this kind of housing in the Blue Hill? And I think that's still a valid question, because that area is generally flat and does not have as many environmental constraints, although it does have a very large RCD. So just curious about the Blue Hill District, and will it be encouraged there as well? Thank you.
Those are good questions. Thanks. Martin Johnson.
Yes, I just wanted to say, I'm really excited about this proposal. I think it's going to be a really exciting change for our town. I live in an older neighborhood in town, one that has a lot of missing middle housing that is currently illegal to build, and I'm looking forward to legalizing it again. I've lived in neighborhoods elsewhere that have more housing in the neighborhood, and it's terrific. You have great neighbors you can see. You have opportunities for the young families. That's a lot of diversity in the neighborhood. I think that's something that's really lacking in a lot of our neighborhoods, particularly the ones that are single family homes on giant lots. The other thing I wanted to mention is I feel like there's been a lot of engagement. I'm been aware of this process since the spring. I've written a lot about it. I've gone to several meetings. There's been a lot of people there. I can't imagine like how much more work the town could do to engage the public. I think this is obviously something that we talked about in the last election. And I think it's really important that we go forward with it kind of on schedule as planned. Because we don't have time to wait. We're very quickly moving to a place where the average house in Chapel Hill is going to be $1 million. We're going to have neighborhoods that are emptying out. The playground in my neighborhood already is empty because there are no kids. People with kids can't afford to live in my neighborhood. So you have a playground that's empty every day and night. And so I think it's really, really important to get this through and to kind of bring back the diversity that our town used to have and make it a better place.
Thank you. Fred, I believe we already chatted with you, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Chris has another question and she should be coming in shortly.
Okay.
I lost him.
Chris, we can hear you. We just don't.
Oh,
see
okay.
you.
Sorry, I do, after that last comment, I do want to support what Jill Blackburn said. I think our neighborhood, which is Coker Hills West, is very close to her neighborhood. And I think some people have been really engaged, but I agree that most of the community has not been engaged. And I would support what Jill said, and I guess Julie McClintock as well, on the issue of engagement. And I think reaching out to neighborhood associations is a good way to start. Thank you.
Thanks.
Melvin Manuel is coming in.
Okay. Suzanne.
And I think
you're up.
Susanna
Oh,
or Suzanne, yeah.
I was gonna say, Suzanne, do you want to go first since I saw you first?
Can you hear me?
I can. Go for it, Melvin.
Now, can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I can barely hear y'all. I just, again, if I'm up, Melvin Manuel, if my question's up, I want to emphasize that that somebody is paying attention from the city as what the additional resources are going to be need, utilities, all kinds of things, traffic, roads. And where is that money coming from? Because it's my perception that Chapel Hill is not overloaded with a lot of extra money. And so what I would like to know with this change is what's going to support this change and who's going to pay for it.
Let us look into that for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Suzanne?
Hi, thanks for today. And I'm sorry I missed the beginning of your presentation, so you may have already spoken to this. But I'm curious, how do we keep, how are we going to keep these multi-unit houses from becoming student housing with, you know, a fourplex not having 4 families, but having, you know, 12 students living in them? So that is one question. You know, I know plenty of children in town here, or college students in town here, who are living in, you know, newly built infill, and they're paying, you know, per room in duplexes. So I'm very concerned about that, how we're going to keep this from just becoming student infill. Because there's also, you know, backyards with 8 cars in them, or front yards with 8 cars in them. So again, I apologize if you've already spoken to how you're going to keep the student from becoming student housing. And then, to the suggestion about how to communicate, I mean, really, I think, for these older neighborhoods, which I really feel like this is going to be some of our older neighborhoods that are already sort of, being the lower income neighborhoods that didn't, that were built before HOAs, they're going to be the ones that, are really impacted by this. I live in the Booker Creek neighborhood. And, we have, lower end housing. I mean, we're not $1 million houses and we don't have an HOA. So, why, and we have, apartment house nearby. We have a couple of duplexes, but it seems to me we could be a target for just, every house being torn down and being built into fourplexes. But so I guess my thing is, the town really ought to write every taxpayer who is going to be impacted by this, ought to get a letter and say, we are going to change your lot to be something different than it was in the past. And, here's what we think why we're doing it and what we think the implications are. But, if this is really impacting individuals, which I think it is, they deserve to be directly, contacted. So those are my thoughts. And then, like I say, you can add to the question and response notes about how we're going to keep the student housing, how we're going to keep this from being student housing.
No, we appreciate you talking about that, because student housing has been something that has been on our list of things to think about. And unfortunately, zoning doesn't have the ability to prevent who the renters are, but we can try to make sure that we're addressing nuisances and ensuring that when students are the residents, that they are good actors as much as we can. We have about 15 minutes left. Does anybody else that didn't add to the Q&A or the chat have anything that they would like to add? And if you do, just raise your hand and we'll make sure to bring you in. Okay, Jeanette Badge, I saw you come in first.
Hi, this is Jeanette. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi.
Okay, thanks. And I apologize. I missed the very beginning, so I hope I'm not repeating the question. For me, it's what many people express, the environmental impervious surface is a huge, I've been studying stormwater a lot lately for the town, is a huge concern. And so I have to actually see how that would, work potentially, because certainly when a single family home leaves and you're building a quadplex, you're building more impervious surface. I mean, not necessarily, somebody can build the house that big, I understand, but that's pretty rare. And also, the cars, if I understand correctly, a single family home can have 4 cars. So if we build a fourplex, are we allowed to have 16 cars? And I just think communication and unintended consequences needs to be thought out really carefully before you change the zoning on somebody's lot. And I know some in the form-based code, there were unintended consequences, like the RCB got eliminated because no one specifically put it in there. So that type of thing needs to really be thought out very, very well before zoning changes are made. And I would be very much in favor of a letter going out to all homeowners. This is a huge change for homeowners. So thank you.
Thank you. Not sure who came in next, but Kurt Spurlock, we haven't heard from you yet.
Oh, okay, thanks. Yeah, so I think just to add a couple of questions here, what are the guarantees or what are the mechanisms to ensure that this notion of a missing middle is in fact filled by the type of people we're talking about offering up housing to, right? So I think, Martin mentioned this, these, notions of diversity are in a lot of ways fantastic, but how are they ensured, right? Because if you're talking about the opportunity to tear down on, a $500,000 house or whatever it might be, maybe it's not that, and rebuild it, there's obviously profit maximizing behavior on the other end of that. I think, the sort of second question there to follow that is, are you talking about owner occupied units in these things or rentals? And I think that's a key idea here to think about what it means to make good on the goals, which somebody else had mentioned, right? And so I guess that's it. The other thing is to think about the impact of potentially quadrupling or quintupling or whatever the number of people on a street in a neighborhood, for example, and obviously nothing happens overnight, but I do think that's a worthwhile thing to sort of map out for people. Even in the most literal sense of what does it look like to property taxes, right? What does it look like to, do they go up? Do they go down? In some ways, right? If you add a bunch of people and spread the same cost over more people, then ostensibly you start to lower people's individual taxes, but probably not, right? So I do think there are some of those things to think about here. And part of this, I'll be honest, is playing off of what I've just seen, which is, tearing down apartments, tearing down whatever the hotel and the sports bar up at the corner of Ephesus and Fordham and that type of stuff. Those are not, to my eye, being built to be especially affordable, right? So what does it look like to make something, if we're saying current median house prices are too high, what does it look like to change things to actually ensure that other housing starts to shift that median in the lower direction, if that's the actual stated goal?
Oh, those are good questions. We might have to consult with our economic folks on it, but we'll add it to our list. Let's see, Julie McClintock or Kurt, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I was just saying thank you.
Okay, thank you. We only have a few minutes left. Julie McClintock, did you have some final comments?
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I'm thinking about the notice, the suggestion to let more people know what's going to be what's being proposed. And so I'm thinking that when there's a zoning change in town, I think there's a requirement that a postcard be sent within so many feet. So if all these people are going to be affected, then I think the idea of a mass postcard is actually very much in order. So I wanted to add my support to that. And then the last speaker really, I think, hit on something important, which is the town's doing all this for a purpose, which is to bring more diversified housing. And the question is, are we really going to get it with this change? And I have my doubts about that, because if you look at North Side, years and years ago, we had a terrific problem with the influx of students and lots being subdivided and all kinds of stuff being put up. And it really lost its character. And the African-American community was very upset about this, came to town hall and said, please help us. How can we do something here? And in the end, the town did a neighborhood conservation district, which was the first. It sort of started it. So I think the point here is that is what we're doing actually going to bring the desired outcome? Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. I'm going to do Richard Mitchell and then we'll do Susan Lyons, okay?
Thank you. Just two quick things. Just to confirm, there's really no mechanism to prevent students from any new construction being utilized as student housing. Is that correct? I mean, legally, there's no mechanism to segment that group or.
No, I mean, we can't discriminate against renters.
Right. And the other thing is it does come to, I'll definitely reinforce the sending letters to homeowners, especially because, when they purchased the property under a zoning, they assumed, that zoning would be in place moving forward. And then to adjust their zoning it will have a significant impact to the land being underneath the home and the dwelling itself. So it seems like that would be something that we would want to, like, again, I have a neighbor that does not have a cell phone, let alone an internet connection, which is hard to believe in 2023, but there are still people out there that work at the university that aren't connected. So I would recommend that. And finally, I guess it sounds like, for internalizing this a bit, I would need to knock my house down and build, 3 or 4 units on it to allow multiple students to live on the property. Is that I wouldn't be able to just convert my house, like add additional walls to my existing house to break it up into apartments.
So, I mean, we can talk about your specific case if you want to more offline, but generally you'd have to remodel your house to create the additional apartment units.
Got it.
And then
Perfect.
you could choose to rent them to students.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm going to do Susan Lyons and then we'll do Melvin.
I think Kurt really made my point, and I just want to reemphasize it, that there's an issue of unintended consequences, especially about how much these properties would sell or rent for because of the need for infrastructure. And I think before we go there, somebody needs to consider how the infrastructure will be paid for to support these things in order to keep the prices down. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Melvin? Oh, hang on, let's unmute you.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, sorry about that. At any rate, these have been a lot of great questions that need to be answered. What vehicle are you going to use when you list all these questions and you have an answer to them to get them to the people that are interested? And how are you going to disseminate that information so that everybody that should know, whether they've even been involved or not, will know the answers to all these questions?
No, that's a good question, and I'm going to address that when we close out. And so, Martin Johnson, I think you're the last one for today. If anybody else has anything, just please put it in the chat, put it in the Q&A, and we'll take it in.
Great. Thanks again. I just want to kind of underscore how much work has been put into this proposal. I'm really impressed with the level of detail and sophistication. Again, I've been following this for almost a year since they've been talking about it. And I think it's also important to note that the body of people that are here today are not representative of Chapel Hill, demographically, racially, socioeconomically, in all ways. And I think who does represent Chapel Hill is our town council. You look at our town council and they are both our elected representatives, and they also look like Chapel Hill. And I think it's really important to note that this is a priority of the town council. Missing middle really matters to us. We're trying to make a complete community, trying to make one that's more inclusive. And I think it's very important for us to go forward with this initiative, because to not do so, to let someone try to kind of stop it is really, I think, does a disservice to all of us and to our democratic process. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And thank you all for your comments and making time today at lunchtime. So a few just last minute housekeeping things. We have been recording the meeting. We will convert it, I think, into a YouTube page, and we'll provide a link for it on the website. I'm also going to upload the PowerPoint, the tables that I shared here. I can also add the links that we included in the chat. And then we will take all the questions that you all provided, and we will probably put it in some kind of a Word document. We'll try to work through those in the next week or so. And then we will also put those on the project webpage. I believe when you all registered for this, we got your email addresses. And so Judy's telling me yes, that we did. And so I can, once that information is all available, I can ping you all via email and just let you know that it's up there and it's available for you. I don't know, Judy, Taz, was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, just I reiterate, Anya's thank you for attendance, and we certainly appreciate your comments and share them with us, and we're happy to try to answer all your questions.
And I know Corey Lyles on our staff might have some parting words.
Not trying to have the last word, but I really hear what everyone's saying about trying to spread the word better. We can look at how to do kind of more mass communication around this, but I think some of the most effective could be coming from you all. If you have neighbors, people in the community, that when we email out more information, feel free to forward it or go ahead and tell people about what you heard today and encourage them to check out the website. I know people are saying, email and digital isn't the way to reach everyone, but neither is mail. We have to figure out the right combination. So hoping y'all can assist us with promoting this, getting the word out about this initiative. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your afternoon.